movement. Other than that, it doesn't really happen. In professional sports, professional leagues take the notion of tampering pretty seriously. There are fines given out for that. That's not the kind of thing that is looked upon, casually by professional sports. They enforce their tampering rules. Whereas in college football, technically there are, some rules in place that are supposed to prevent tampering, but no one seems intent on enforcing those whatsoever. So as far as like the timing seeming somewhat suspicious, unfortunately, we just kind of live in a day and age now where there's no respect towards time at all. There's no, I guess, mechanism in place that prevents, anybody from seemingly reaching out. Because, you look at Mike Griffith's reporting on this. Mike had the story, and, this kind of, there's been some rumor chatter about this already, but Mike reported that Miami, Florida State expected to be involved here with Amarius Mims. Well, I'm going to be Pollyanna-ish intentionally here just for a moment. How in the world could it be that a guy like Mims just entered the transfer portal, yet we already have two obvious leaders for his service? How could that possibly be? I ask, intentionally, Pollyanna-ish, because we know that schools like that are already contacting these players before the end of the transfer portal, which they're not supposed to do, which leads me to say, is there any intent on anybody's part that has any control over college football to enforce these kinds of rules? Now, I don't know what the answer to that question is, but that to me is a little bit of a problem. That you want to have free one-time transfer, fine, have it. You want to have, whatever else, but if you're going to not respect the sanctity of who's on somebody else's roster, constantly asking each coach to re-recruit all 85 of his scholarship players every single day, that's the potential for the kind of chaos that threatens the sport. Now, not threatens Georgia, because Georgia's going to be, Georgia no matter what. Like Amarius Mims leaving Georgia doesn't change Georgia's chances for winning this national championship for this upcoming season at all. And I say that with all due respect to a guy like Mims, who I think is a pretty interesting talent for sure. But in terms of Georgia's chances for national championship success this year, they don't go down at all by losing Amarius Mims, nor do they go down certainly by losing Clay Webb. That this kind of movement in spring doesn't threaten Georgia as much as it threatens the stability that kind of keeps college football as strong as it's been. So there will be a lot of big opinions about this today. Randy Hall excited about the future of Ernest Green. Yeah, can't wait to see him. Hemingway said Saban speculated about player contacts becoming a thing in the future. Interesting take on how things might evolve. Yeah, it seems like we've had a lot of this kind of stuff in basketball for a long time. You're not saying player contact. You mean player contracts. Yeah, honestly, what Saban said, I believe you're referencing his statement the day before the national championship game. And I do think that Saban actually has a pretty good point about this, and I don't enjoy saying that. But in this particular case, I think that Saban actually is onto something. That if we're going to have like Wild West NIL, Wild West, free one-time transfer, maybe we should leverage one for the other. In other words, hey, you want some NIL money, then it needs to come with some sort of expectation of agreement of, okay, well, if we're going to give you this or we're going to make it possible for you to get this, we want something in exchange for that. That you can't have, you can't have your cake and eat it too. That if you're going to cash in on your connection to this program, then we're going to ask you to stick around this program for a little while. And I'm not quite so sure that's not maybe the direction some of this is going. In fact, I'd reference Drew Butler, who obviously works with Icon Source, the company that's involved in so much NIL stuff. He actually, made this point the other day when he was on our show about kind of the Autobahn. Like, okay, the Autobahn has no speed limit, but there are medians at least. And I think that's kind of an interesting analogy that there will maybe in the future be some sort of parameter put around the NIL stuff, and maybe it will reflect a little bit about what Saban talked about before the national championship game, because I did not think that was a bad point. Let's see what Scott Harris says. I would hate for my job to depend on the decisions of 18, 19-year-old guys. Yeah, and I don't mean to be so doom and gloom, but this is why a lot of coaches are spending more time with their family. This is why a lot of coaches are leaving college to go to the NFL. Chris Kiffin or any other example you want to get to. Maybe even Matt Luke. This is why a lot of coaches are getting out of the college game, because the challenge facing a college coach right now is greater than it's ever been. Now, they are paid handsomely for trying to meet that challenge, but it still impacts your quality of life. To a certain extent, your paycheck only goes so far in terms of addressing your quality of life concerns. And for a lot of college coaches right now, there are some pretty big quality of life concerns, and no one's playing the sad violin for them because they are all millionaires for the most part. But that is just a real thing, is that we are asking college coaches to do things we've never asked them to do before, and not all of them want to do it. If they've got a chance to go coach in the NFL, they're going to do that. If they got a chance to sit back and count their money because of what they've done with previous jobs, some of them are going to do that too. That's just the current state we live in, because it is not great for everybody. William Perry, we are live today, so I'm happy to see you and happy to have you here. Scott Harris, that's very funny. Very funny. Bill Bourne says the NIL and the transfer portal needs some major tweaking. Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I'll make this point and we'll get ready to get started. Are we on all the other platforms now? So good morning to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. I may even say this during the regular show, that the right amount of rules for optimum freedom isn't zero. In other words, right now there's very little rule whatsoever governing the transfer portal, and that seems great for players. Hey, I can do whatever I want to. I can transfer whenever I want to, and that seems really cool. But everybody else has the same thing there as well. So let's say that you are, so-and-so player at so-and-so position. We're seeing this happen with quarterbacks a little bit more frequently, where, okay, I got a free one-time transfer. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then you bounce to that other school, and suddenly the program then takes another transfer behind you. And all of a sudden now you thought you were entering into one situation, and actually you're entering into another situation now where you've burned your one-time transfer. You're on campus there. The other program's taking another transfer after you. Now you got multiple players competing for the same spot when you sort of thought you were entering into a more advantageous situation. And suddenly, after you've transferred, the scenario has actually evolved here a little bit. And so, that's where I kind of get off by saying that, hey, optimum freedom isn't found in zero rules, because in that particular case, the zero rule thing actually works against the players a little bit too. So it is just kind of a messy situation right now. And listen, Georgia's going to be fine no matter what. I think the messiness of the Amarius Mims transfer, I think, speaks to issues that the sport ought to address, not so much what Georgia ought to address, because Georgia's status as reigning national champion is unchanged. Georgia's status as shortlist contender for the upcoming national championship is, for the most part, unchanged here. But the sport itself, boy, I don't know how you go about, strength is found in stability. And college football over the course of the last, 20 years, whatever, has been an incredibly strong sport. And one of the things that's powered that strength is the stability of the sport. And when you threaten the stability, I think you threaten the strength. And make no mistake about it, there are some people who want to do this. There are some people who would like to see college football just not be as strong of a sport as it has been for any number of reasons. That's why there's no shortage of cheerleaders. Anytime something sort of crazy happens in the sport, they like the idea of chaos being inserted into the college football conversation. There are people that kind of like that. But obviously around here, we don't feel that way. We love, college football. We love, the way in which it rallies, towns and communities around each other, the way it provides a opportunity for players to go better themselves, become very rich playing the game, or just be better men on the other side of having played the game. We like and celebrate all that kind of stuff. And anything that threatens the popularity, the strength of the sport, also threatens the good things that it does for those that play it, who cheer for it, or whatever else. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So, man, it is really busy today. So here's what we're going to do. John Stinchcomb later on. John talking about the departure of Clay Webb, the departure of Amarius Mims, what he thinks it means. I believe there are two misnomers in particular about the transfer portal and maybe how it involves Georgia that I think need to be addressed there as well. We'll do that here in a little bit. But off the top of the program, obviously there is a lot around the announcement of Amarius Mims entering the transfer portal that kind of points the direction into how all things are changing in college football. As I said before, a little bit of NIL stuff, a little bit of transfer portal stuff, all the craziness that's inserted into that discussion because of that. However, big picture, there is one really big thing for Georgia in particular that's not changing at all. And I think in light of the kind of chaos that seems to exist out there, reminding people about that seems like a pretty good place for us to begin today. So we'll see if we can do that. We're happy to have you with us as we do. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Let me just say one thing, real quick thing off the top here. I don't get sick ever at all. I also don't typically deal with allergies, things like that, but apparently I must be a little bit. I've been outside a lot lately, and so I got a little bit of a thing going on right now. So if I'm a little nasally or a little scratchy with the throat, I certainly apologize for that. Hopefully it's not too annoying. I'm fine. I'm going to power through it. No big deal on my end, but I'm always cognizant of how the show sounds in your ears, especially for those of you listening to earbuds, things like that. So my apologies if my voice sounds a little bit different today. Hopefully that's not too annoying. And let me also say this as a way of kind of getting the show started today. It's obviously not good news for us when a guy like Amarius Mims announces his intent to transfer. Now, we'll get to the Clay Webb part of this before the show is done today, too, because that's also out there. But Amarius Mims going into the transfer portal, Mike Griffiths had good reporting on this. Connor Riley's been on this there as well at DawgNation.com. We just don't view that as good news because you've heard me say this now a lot over the course of the last few weeks, that if you want the 5 best potential offensive linemen you could have on the field for Georgia this year, in some form or fashion, Mims would have been a part of that. Former 5-star, former elite recruit. And we talked about, hey, it seems like Broderick Jones is emerging at left tackle. Warren McClendon seems to have that bedrock right side locked down. Could Mims kind of travel the Evan Neal path? Neal's about to be a very high first round pick from Alabama, having played offensive tackle, but started his career at Alabama playing guard. Could Amarius Mims do some version of that this year? And could that be a way you get your 5 best offensive linemen on the field? We'd said that quite often. We had hoped that was the case, but it certainly appears like that's not the way all of this is going, that Mims is going to leave the Georgia program, entering his name into the transfer portal. I guess he could change his mind just because you go into the portal. Doesn't mean you're definitely leaving, but for now, that seems to be the direction that all of this is going. And I think the immediate thought on some of this from some folks is, whoa, this is all very strong evidence for how much college football is changing. And certainly it's hard not to notice that we live in the name, image, likeness era now, and that seems to be bringing about great change. We live in the free one-time transfer. We kind of call this transfer portal, but the truth is the thing that's brought the most change is the freedom to transfer anytime you want to, really, literally anytime you want to, for whatever reason you want to, and that seems to have brought about great change. And I think those of us who are Georgia fans are left to wonder a couple things here. What does this mean for the sport overall, which is a fair question, but what does this mean for Georgia in particular? And I think that's the thing I want to deal with here just for a moment, because even in the midst of great change coming to college football, the advent of NIL, the advent of free one-time transfer, it's important to note what isn't changing for Georgia, and it's important to provide the reminder for how Georgia leans in on what doesn't change as a way of powering last year's national championship and whatever future national championships Georgia is going to win. This is corny, I apologize, but I'm going to say it anyway. There's a story attributed to Abraham Lincoln. And then oftentimes, like these stories that get attributed to these historical figures are oftentimes not really true, but they still kind of serve a purpose. The story goes that when Abraham Lincoln was, doing Abraham Lincoln things, he once said that if you gave me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. Basically saying I would prepare and then I would do the work that I needed to do. And, Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, kind of had a version of this there as well about sharpening the saw being one of the 7 habits that if you want to be the best version of yourself you can be, sharpening the saw, sharpening your skills, a way to do that. The Abraham Lincoln story goes that if I had to chop down a tree, I had 6 hours to do it. I'd want to spend most of that time making sure I had the sharpest possible axe so that the tree was then easier to chop down. And as I said before, that's kind of a corny story, kind of a corny analogy, but the reason why stories like this stand the test of time and live on as long as they do is because there is a lot of element of truth in this. Is that player development, human development, but in this case we're talking college football, player development still matters. Even in the days of NIL and even in the days of, hey, a player may just bounce out of this program anytime he wants to for whatever reason he wants to, that doesn't change the fact that player development still matters. In other words, every head coach in college football right now has a choice. Do you want to treat your players, your potential recruits, your current players, whatever else, do you want to treat them as finished products or work in progress? Is this player a finished product or is he a work in progress? And the best programs, the best coaches, the leaders of those great programs will always lean in the direction of treating their players as works in progress, even though that's not how the players want to be viewed. Players want to be viewed as finished products. Hey, look at me. I'm worth a bunch of NIL money because of what my recruiting ranking was. Or, hey, I should be starting right away because look how big I am. Look how strong I am. Look how good I look, to quote Ron Burgundy. Players want to be treated as finished products. That's just the way that it goes. But the best coaches, leaders of the best programs, will treat those players as works in progress regardless of how the players themselves want to be viewed. And that doesn't lessen the need for great talent. You have to have very high-level talent. You have to have big-time, good-looking prospects. But finding a way to treat those good-looking, future elite potential players, those potential prospects, those high-level prospects, as works in progress, that is how great coaches are going to run their programs. And when you want to look at how Georgia won the national championship this past season, that explanation probably serves to explain Georgia's national championship as much as anything. You take elite talent, you take unlimited potential, and you work to make it better. You work to develop it. You work to sharpen the saw, sharpen the axe. You work to take that raw potential and turn it into something, and that in so many ways is how Georgia won the national championship. And in fact, if you want to go back just this last week, Kirby Smart was talking about wide receivers, and this is probably an intentional drop if you really want to kind of think about this, that this was not just a happenstance that Smart happened to mention Amarius Mims. He clearly, probably had, some inkling that this was kind of in the works. I think a lot of us had at least some, rumor mill connection related to all of this. But Smart was asked about wide receivers, and he kind of pivots the answer here to Amarius Mims. But what Smart talked about in his press conference last week is so similar to what I was just saying a moment ago, that developing raw potential is the job of a coach. And no matter how things change in college football with NIL and transfer portal and everything else, the job of a coach to develop the player, to treat the player like a work in progress, no matter how talented he appears to be, that does not change. And Smart mentioned that while mentioning Amarius Mims last week. This is Kirby.
What we're trying to do is establish depth at wide receiver. So we're trying to get young players that are talented to go really far. So Denali Moore said, he's a young player that's talented, but he's got a long way to go. The same way at offensive line. We look at offensive line and I'm like, man, look how far Amarius Mims has come. Man, look how far this guy's grown and gotten better. Devin Willock. I mean, like I want to see the players improve and not just gel. You know what I mean? Like improve your fundamentals and get better so that our team can be better. And we've got some guys, that are getting better. I'm excited about that. They're probably not as good as you guys think they are. They might not be as good as they think they are, but they're getting better.
Totally buy into what Smart says there. I'll even fall on the sword, take the L a little bit for what I do to hype up guys like Amarius Mims. Because when you look the way that Mims does, when you have the recruiting ranking that Mims has, clearly guys like me who do shows like this are going to be excited about those kinds of players. But the one thing that also goes along with that is the raw potential, the elite talent, minus the hard work, doesn't really get you anywhere. Now, Kirby Smart was saying in that clip that Mims was on his way to doing that work. He was on his way to growing and getting better. But oftentimes for players like Mims, maybe it's not happening for them as fast as they want it to happen. Maybe that's part of what this is, whatever else. But Smart says right there exactly what I was explaining a moment ago, which is that working to develop a work in progress is going to be the job of a coach, and that's not going to change no matter how much everything else in the sport kind of changes. That you can't change your prime directive, which is develop the elite talent that comes into your program. If you want to play at the national championship level, that's the way it's going to be. And the truth is this has been the kind of the hallmark of the Smart program since he first came on board here. I mean, I want to go back a couple of years ago for a moment, and I want to set these two clips up for a second. They involve Isaiah Wilson. Now, listen, post, leaving Georgia, Wilson's had kind of some weird things happen, right? We understand that. Some of that's been on the field, some of that's been off the field. But this is a guy who came through the Georgia program and became a first-round pick in the NFL draft. First-round pick in the NFL draft. He came through this program as a 5-star, did not play a lick in his first year here in 2017. He watched another incoming freshman get a chance to start at right tackle, go on to glory, go on to accolades. That was Andrew Thomas. And Isaiah Wilson had to just sort of stand there and watch it. Thomas was actually a lower-rated recruit than Wilson had been. And he was still sort of forced to watch the guy who was only a 4-star, that's what Andrew was, take the spot that maybe the 5-star thought was coming his way. And eventually, Wilson worked his way into playing time and became a starter and eventually became a first-round pick himself. And going into, I guess this would have been the 2019 season, going into that 2019 season, Wilson talked about what it was that he learned while watching Andrew Thomas play in 2017. Now, I realize that a lot's changed in college football, but this is not 45 years ago. This is 5 seasons ago, or just, around that time, less than 5 years ago, that a guy like Isaiah Wilson was talking about what had happened for him here at Georgia. And in light of what we're saying here about the need to develop elite players, that Georgia actually has a track record of doing this for those who are willing to be patient and allow that to occur. And in fact, let me let you hear one of those guys who did become a first-round pick at Georgia explaining that process. This was Isaiah Wilson from a couple of seasons ago.
I want everybody on the team to win. I don't care who you are. If you're on this team and you're in red and black and you're wearing that G and you're out there grinding with me, I want you to win. Whatever's best for the team is what I want. My freshman year, I wasn't ready to play. I sat down and I learned how to be ready to play. In 2018, I played.
My freshman year, I was not ready to play. I sat down and learned how to play. And then the following season, 2018, I was ready to step in and do my thing. I play. In fact, in this same interview from a few years ago, Wilson went into more detail about exactly what it was he spent learning while he wasn't playing in his first year on campus here in 2017. This is more from the eventual first-round pick about some tough early days at Georgia. Very steep learning curve, Isaiah Wilson again.
I think my first year, like any high school senior going to an SEC program in college, you have to get over the little hump and adjust and reacclimate to the SEC. So my first year was a learning curve. Second year, they gave me an opportunity to go out there and play ball, and that's all I wanted to do.
My first year was a learning curve, getting acclimated to the SEC. And then after that, I was ready to go out there and play ball. Those are the words of Isaiah Wilson. Now, you can say what you want about what happened to Wilson after he got that first-round money, whatever else. That's kind of his business. But Georgia, in terms of getting him ready for that paycheck, they absolutely did their thing. That's what we said before about sharpening the axe or sharpening the saw, developing a work in progress and getting him ready to contribute at a very high level. That is what Georgia did with Wilson. That is what I believe could have happened for Amarius Mims here at Georgia there as well. But apparently that's not going to be the case. So listen, that's Mims' choice to make, and he's going to do his thing. But the question becomes, if you're Georgia, what do you do about that? And my answer to this question is kind of nothing, right? I mean, this isn't going to be for everybody. Some players would just rather be thought of as more of a finished product. Some players would rather be thought of as just kind of, or think of themselves as more not willing to do what Georgia's going to ask you to do, not willing to wait as long as Georgia might be willing to, ask you to wait. That's just kind of the way that's going to be for some people. But ultimately, Georgia's path towards success is about staying true to what's made it great, or what has made it great in the past. Because it's not just Isaiah Wilson who's saying the kinds of things that you just heard Wilson saying there. Go back and watch the interview that Jeff did with Jamari Salyer the other day. Salyer, also another former 5-star from the 2018 class. Salyer, also a guy that when he first got here to Georgia did not play very much in his first season on campus. And much the same way that Isaiah Wilson said, man, I learned by watching my first year. Go listen to Jamari Salyer. He said the same thing. I learned by watching. He said, if I'm quoting him correctly, I learned more about football while I wasn't playing than I did while I was playing. And that patience is also about to be rewarded for him there as well. He's a huge part of a national championship winning offensive line. He's about to be an NFL player there too. It is working out exactly as it's supposed to. And that's just kind of the way it goes here for Georgia. It is a path that will not be for everyone. It is a path that's going to ask you to defer some glory, to defer some greatness, to view yourself as a work in progress, developing your skills, as Smart said in the clip we heard a moment ago. And for some people, the path just may be a little easier somewhere else. And you can't really do anything to stop them from taking that path. But if you're Georgia, you can remain steadfastly committed to what has made you a great program prior to this. And my guess is that's exactly what Georgia will continue to do. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good morning to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today, whether it's 9:45 for our first and 15 at DawgNation.com or on the DawgNation app, or 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We are just really happy to have you as a part of the program today, and we really appreciate our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Pella Window and Door of Georgia does so many great things for you. You know, last night I kind of got back home, and we've been gone for a couple days, and I guess we left the air conditioning on. So we got back home last night. It was freezing. Like in the downstairs, it's like 59 degrees or something like that in the house. So my kids are cold natured, so we're cranking up the heat, you know, because they got to go to sleep. They got school the next day. And as I'm turning on that heat, I was thinking, boy, I sure am glad that the stuff that's happening inside the house here isn't escaping out, right? If you had poorly fitted windows or inefficient doors, all that energy, when you crank on that heat, all that energy just escaping out of your house. You don't want that. And that's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides for you, a homeowner yourself, which is making your home feel better on the inside. Things are expensive right now. Heating your home or cooling your home, these cost a lot of money these days, and saving money is important. So when you get better windows and doors, it's going to give you a chance to save on those energy bills, because it's going to keep that energy, the heat that's coming out of the vents or the air conditioning, whatever else, where it's supposed to be. It also looks better on the outside. Nice curb appeal, always a great thing when you think about resale value or just making yourself a good neighbor there in your own community. That is what Pella Window and Door of Georgia is all about. You can find them online at pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. You can give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. You can also stop by and see them in their new, really, really cool experience center right there in Duluth. They're open every single Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 and Saturday from 10 until 4. And if you want to kind of experience what so many homeowners in the Atlanta area have, you know, you look at all the surveys, all the things that have been done. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is just recognized as a leading brand, the leading brand, when it comes to windows and entry doors here in the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia. And if you want to kind of put your hands on it, find out what all the fuss is about, you can do that right there. And the new Experience Center right there in Duluth there as well. A lot of different ways for you to get in touch, but make the decision to equip your house with better windows and doors from our friends at Pella Window and Door. And by the way, you want great savings between now and April 22nd. You can get 50% off qualifying installations or payments as low as $99 a month. So Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. A lot of reasons why that's true, and we're happy to have them as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. Okay, here's what's coming up. Before we're done today, I have a really cool announcement to make, that tomorrow we're going to be giving away some good stuff on the program. And I want to tell you about this now. I want you to stick around for later. We're going to do a really fun giveaway tomorrow, and it leads into a huge week of events for us. I mean, this is going to be such a busy week for us. So I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to telling you more about that before our show is done tomorrow. We'll get John Stinchcomb here, as I said before, coming up in just a bit there as well. Lots of thoughts from him on Mims. Lots of thoughts from him on Clay Webb, who's also entering his name in the transfer portal. We'll cover all of that with John. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse. I want to make two simple points here for a moment about what I think are kind of misnomers, but the current state of the transfer portal as it kind of relates to Georgia, maybe beyond just Georgia here, but there are a couple of things that I think are probably incorrect. Here is one of the things that I think some people argue, and I think they argue this in good faith. It seems like a reasonable argument. I just think it happens to be wrong. There are some people who are going to say, well, BA, you got to look at Jermaine Johnson. Johnson was kind of in an ensemble cast at Georgia. He got out from the shadow of some players at UGA. He goes to Florida State, and which is, by the way, one of the places that Mims is reportedly maybe interested in going. But he goes to Florida State. He puts up huge numbers, and now he's about to be a first-round pick. And I'm left to ask that question, okay, what is it? Is it post hoc, ergo propter hoc? Is that the Latin here? After the fact, therefore because of the fact? That somehow Jermaine Johnson's going to be a first-round pick because he put up big numbers at Florida State. Let me ask you a question. I mean this literally. I don't mean this rhetorically. I mean this literally. Did better stats make Jermaine Johnson a better player? I would suggest they didn't. That Johnson first-round pick, I would say that he may have always been destined to be a first-round pick because of the talent that he displayed at Georgia while he was at Georgia and then at Florida State while he was there. That maybe Florida State used the promise of better stats as a way of luring him into the program, and there's nothing wrong with him wanting more stats, wanting more glory. Some players are going to want that. But the stats themselves, I would suggest, did not make Jermaine Johnson a first-round pick. That Johnson was maybe a first-round pick all along and just went to Florida State as a way of putting up the kind of numbers that first-round picks maybe think they're supposed to put up. And I'll give you some examples of this. I mean, there is some talk that Trayvon Walker may be the number one overall pick in the entire draft. He didn't have great stats at Georgia last year. He had very good stats, and he was a great player, but it wasn't necessarily reflected in the stat sheet. Yet when it comes to getting his hand shaken by Roger Goodell, that doesn't seem to have hurt Trayvon Walker at all. Devontae Wyatt played in the shadow of Jordan Davis. Is that hurting his draft status? Doesn't appear to be. Quay Walker played in the shadow of Nakobe Dean. Is that hurting his draft status? Doesn't appear to be. That playing in the shadow of other great players at Georgia does not appear to be harming other great players' chances of being drafted in the first round of the upcoming draft, nor do I think that would have been the case with Jermaine Johnson necessarily either. In other words, it's obvious that Johnson left Georgia and went on to Florida State and had better stats, but it's not obvious to me that those better stats made Jermaine Johnson any better of a player, that he was always a pretty highly viewed prospect, whether he was playing in an ensemble cast at Georgia or in a starring role at Florida State, that the numbers alone didn't make Johnson a more valuable commodity to NFL draft scouts. They were more than capable of finding him if he would have stayed at Georgia and been in the shadow or working in concert with all the other great players that Georgia would have. Here's the other thing there as well. You've heard me be kind of skeptical about some of this free one-time transfer stuff before. I do think there's some sort of, I don't know, some sort of parameter that needs to be put around the transfer portal a little bit. And the number one argument that gets made against that is, well, come on now. Coaches just move about anytime they want to. They're leaving and taking jobs all the time. And it is true that the coaches do move about a lot, right? I mean, and it has been said frequently, and this is a very reasonable argument that, well, if coaches can kind of bounce from job to job, and that, doesn't seem to be messing up the sport too bad, well, how come the players can't, bounce around from school to school? Why should player movement be restricted more so than coach movement? It seems like a pretty reasonable argument. I don't deny that. But what I would say back in response to that is that I think the people who think, hey, man, the players just want the same deal the coaches have, I think they're missing something pretty important here, is that while coaches do move a lot, they kind of move within a couple of expected time frames. It happens frequently at the end of the season, or it happens like right after signing day. Now, maybe it shouldn't happen right after signing day, but there are a couple of obvious times during the year in which coaches leave. There is no sort of expected time frame for players. Some of them leave during the season. Some of them leave during the middle of spring practice. That's what Amarius Mims is doing. There's really no time during the year in which players can't leave or won't leave. Any moment in time of the 12-month calendar, there is a possibility that a player might abandon ship from that program. That's actually a level of chaos that does not exist with the way that coaches typically leave. It's very unusual for a coach to leave during spring practice or during the season. It happens at sort of dysfunctional programs like Auburn, but it does not really happen across the board in college football necessarily all that much. And kind of to add on to that point for a moment, go read Mike Griffith's story at DawgNation.com from the other day. Mike says that, hey, Florida State and Miami are already kind of, the expected leaders for a guy like Mims. And there's a lot of rumor mill stuff that seems to back that up, but that's good reporting from Mike. And I'm going to be a Pollyanna intentionally here for a moment. How could it be that a player that just entered the transfer portal already has two leaders for his services? How could that be? I'm saying this intentionally naive to make a point. It's fairly obvious that if Florida State and Miami are already viewed as the leaders for Mims, that they must have been in contact with each other prior to Mims going to the transfer portal. And nobody seems to care about that, especially when it's the big program, Georgia, that's losing the former 5-star player. There's some folks even almost kind of like that a little bit. But trust me when I tell you, the strength of college football is built on its stability. And the stability of college football, or the stability of any organization, entity, institution, is established by its rules. That if you start picking at the rules of college football, if college football is going to be a sport with no rules, then it's going to be a sport with no stability. And the lack of stability was going to affect the strength, the popularity. That all of this kind of works together here a little bit. So I'd be very careful with this notion of that the optimum amount of rules for freedom for players is zero. I'd be very careful trying to make the case on that too much. That doesn't seem to be good for the future of the sport, I would say. And you say, well, this is a business like anything else, like professional sports. Well, look, there are a lot of professional leagues that take tampering pretty seriously. Organizations get fined for that. That they take tampering pretty seriously. And I think that college football ought to consider how seriously it wants to take the idea of programs recruiting players off somebody else's roster without that player entering into the transfer portal. That's the kind of thing that doesn't really get looked at too kindly by professional sports. They take that pretty seriously. I would suggest that maybe college football ought to take that more seriously too. So there's a lot to speak about on all of that. That's just some of that for me off the top. I am very curious to find out what our buddy John Stinchcomb thinks about this there as well, because John is a great guy to talk to in a day like this. He is a former elite offensive lineman in his own right, All-American at Georgia, former big-time recruit, goes on to make a bunch of money in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the New Orleans Saints, and now he is watching other players hope to travel down the same path that he's been on. So what does he think about a guy like Mims or a guy like Clay Webb, who we really haven't gotten into too much yet? What does he think about their departure? What does he think about how all of that is going? We will get that from John here and get some thoughts from him on all of that. A very busy day with a lot of news, and so a great chance to talk to John Stinchcomb about all of that right now here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, hello to John Stinchcomb here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Man, John, so much to get into with you. I've been doing more of the Mims stuff on the show. We got to get to the Clay Webb part of this there as well, but let me just start with the Mims thing here first, and we'll go big picture and see where the conversation takes us. Amarius Mims into the transfer portal, former five-star who maybe going to find out, or at least try to find out if the grass truly is greener somewhere else other than UGA. What do you think of the Mims news as it's been reported that he's maybe on his way out here of the University of Georgia?
Well, it's frustrating. It's a little bit disheartening for Georgia fans. It's also encouraging. It means that Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon are playing at a level that Amarius Mims is looking at this and going, there's not a clear shot for me to crack the starting lineup at my natural position at tackle. It also probably means that either it wasn't a great fit in the interior at a guard position, or that the other players that are in competition for those spots are playing at a level at which Amarius is going, maybe there's better opportunity for me. The way I read it, he probably comes into college, five-star guy. He's been told by everyone and their brother that he's on a 3-year plan. And in 3 years, at the end of that season, he's going to be heading to the NFL and going to become a professional football player. So if you're looking at year 2 and you're saying there's not that availability that I was anticipating, and that the 2 tackles that are filling the spots that I'm competing for aren't walking out the door at the end of this year either, that there's probably a better opportunity for me to execute on the plan that I had a year and a half ago when I signed on the dotted line to come to Georgia. You're looking at Salyer's on his way out, and maybe that's a spot that I can easily fill. I'm sure that was part of the recruiting process for him. But I think for Georgia fans, you look at it and you go, a month ago, including Owen Condon and with Drew Bobo coming to town over the summer, you had over 21 offensive linemen on scholarship. When those numbers just aren't going to add up. I think everyone looked at that position group specifically and said there's going to be attrition from National Signing Day to that start of training camp. There will be some change. There will be some turnover. 21 guys in a specific position group just doesn't seem realistic when your numbers still aren't under, 85 or 86, whatever it needs to be by the summer. So I think we all realize and recognize that there is going to be players walk away. Condon being the first, looks like Clay Webb and Mims are the next dominoes to fall. And yeah, it's unfortunate because I think Amarius Mims, just from the limited opportunities that he had this past year, that he's going to be a really, really good player. He certainly has the frame. He has the tenacity. I remember breaking down his film on this show with you last year and talking about the type player he is and the assets that he has. So it's, it's unfortunate for Georgia that you lose a player of his caliber. But with that said, the way the game is being played right now, and I'm talking about more than just between the sidelines, especially in this off season, that the transfer portal is a very real opportunity for a lot of these guys to see if there's a better, quicker fix for them to address any of the issues that they might have in their program.
Yeah, I want to deal with a lot of that because I think that's a lot of very good stuff. First of all, on the idea of Mims and what his prospects could have been for this upcoming year had he stayed at Georgia. I'd said many times that, hey, I like the idea of a best five for UGA that includes Mims, maybe playing the guard spot. And I'll admit to be ignorant of what I speak about here, John. I'm going to oversimplify this to make the point that as a fan, a guy who watches these games from inside the stadium or on TV, I've largely operated on the assumption that, hey, not every guard could be a tackle, but maybe every tackle could be a guard. That, hey, just throw Mims out there to a guard spot and let him, do his thing because he's so talented. We've seen like a guy like Evan Neal kind of do that thing for Alabama, who's on his way to being a very high first-round pick at the tackle spot, but also played some guard for the Crimson Tide. Is that a gross oversimplification that a guy like Mims, who is more naturally a tackle, that you can't just necessarily throw him out there at guard just because he's a potential talent? There is a level of technique there that it requires you to know a little bit about playing the interior offensive line position there. I mean, how easy would it have been for Georgia to take the more obvious tackle Mims and just kind of throw him out there in the guard spot just to give him a chance to play somewhere? How easy or not easy would that have been?
Well, I think Evan Neal's a great example because both guys are, your 6'7", 6'8" range, not your typical guard, but Georgia has utilized a player of that same build or type in Ben Cleveland, who came out of high school is probably projected more as a tackle than he was a guard. But because of his flexibility and his opportunities and his skill set, was able to very quickly assimilate into that guard position and never really came back up the outside. And, I think it's a player-by-player analysis that you have to make. Salyer is a guy that I think most people would say is more proficient at guard, but yet had the ability to slide out the tackle and did so at a very high level, playing left tackle until a national championship game where you need to make a change, and all of a sudden, because of his flexibility, he's able to move to the inside. You've got a guy like Broderick Jones that can step in, and there's not much of a drop-off. So when you have that versatility, it allows you to keep that best five mentality as a coaching staff. And, if Mims is one of the best five and you've already got two tackles that have pretty much cemented themselves in the starting positions on both sides of the ball, then absolutely you give him the chance to compete at one of those interior spots, which I'm sure was part of that discussion. As these coaches are looking through and combing through the transfer portal for what can help them, part of that assessment is understanding the mentality of the guys in your own locker room. And if you've got talent, and Amarius Mims is certainly falls into that category, you're trying to figure out ways to keep him in-house. You don't want to lose a guy of his talent level. And so if that's, can we give him some opportunities at guard that both helps the team and gives us more opportunities and options down the road, because Lord knows injuries happen all the time, then you're going to try to take advantage of that. So, this isn't a new concept, a novel idea that coaches should look at players at different positions. for a number of reasons, and I'm sure that was explored with Mims.
So let me also bring up something else you mentioned before too. Is like we're in the age of transfer portal now, the age of NIL, and there's all these like new things that coaches are forced to deal with, which leads to the obvious question of, okay, well, how much then does a program like Georgia, coach like Kirby, need to change with the times, in terms of what you're asking from players these days? And John, I don't mind telling you, and maybe I'm old fashioned, and I'm sure you're probably kind of, closely aligned with me on this, but nonetheless, we'll have the conversation of, if you want to play at the national championship level, I don't think you can change too much. I mean, look at Kentucky basketball. They're number one, number two in recruiting each and every year. They're a factory of future NBA players, but they're not winning anything right now. They're getting beat by St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That you have to ask something of the elite talent that comes in your program if you want to be yourself an elite program, if you want to be winning games, competing for championships, things like that. So you can't do it without elite players or elite prospects, but you are going to have to continue to work to develop them, continue to ask big things from them, to challenge them if you want to be as good as you want to be. If you acquiesce too much to whatever modern demands the elite prospect has, I don't know that you're in a national championship level program by doing that. So to wrap up here, give you a chance to talk, how much should Georgia change in light of the new world of college football that we're in? If it wants to compete at the national championship level, I don't think it can change too much.
I think you look at the other elite programs in college football, and you hear what's coming from them, and what you see from the Alabamas and the Ohio States and Clemson is we might be able to add a piece or two, sometimes three, but really how we're going to build our program is from within through high school recruitment. And we want our core group of guys to believe in the system that we've created, in the machine that will allow them to maximize their abilities and get them where they want to go. But we're not going to do that by combing through a list of the entire transfer portal and trying to create an opportunity to just bring in a vast majority of the guys that can help us out. I think you're looking at position-specific needs. If there's a handful of guys, like what we saw with Kendrick this past year and Smith, and being able to add them late in the transfer portal season, and see if we can address some specific needs and how they fit in our system. But you're not going to just totally identify yourself as a transfer destination and expect to have the culture, the identity, the quality that these top programs have when they establish everything from in-house. I think you're looking at adding to it, but not making it your primary source, which is the same expression that's being made. There was recently an article from Dabo Sweeney saying, we might need to consider blowing this whole thing up. And you look at the direction of NIL and transfer portal, and I think the two work hand in hand, and it's a much, much different model of college sports, specifically college football, than what it was, let's just call it 5 years ago. The landscape has changed so much that they're barely identifiable as the same creature even. And it's probably same could be true 5 years from now when you look at where college football is, just based on, I was listening to you earlier talk about the comparison between college football players and college coaches, and that, well, they can transfer. Well, they're also under contract. Yeah. And if you want to be treated like an NFL player, which is, you have contracts, which there's a heck of a lot more restrictions on NFL players now, it seems like, than there are for college players, and their ability to pick up and move and transfer when things aren't to your liking. There's not near the amount of control in the NFL level. When you've signed a contract and let's say you're on a rookie deal, most teams can lock you in for 5 years, and that's just not the case, nor is it the model for college football. But to be honest with you, BA, I don't know what that model for college football is right now.
Yeah.
There's with the ability for players to receive payment. And, we can act naive and say that that's not tied to a specific university, but that's hogwash. I mean, guys are going to specific places, and part of that is understanding their marketability. When you have long snappers making 5 figures for playing at a particular university and the marketing deals that are availed to them, then that matters. And you can only extrapolate out what that means to more prolific positions and the exposures that they might receive at a given university.
Let me finish by talking about the other offensive lineman who's put his name in the transfer portal, and that's Clay Webb. And, John, behind the scenes, we always get a lot of comments here on DawgNation over the years about what's going on with Webb and, when's he going to emerge. And I certainly understand why this is weird to a lot of Georgia fans that, okay, so here's a guy who's a 5-star recruit, big recruiting win for Georgia over Alabama and Clemson, a lot of talk about Webb as a recruit, and then we never heard a single word about him as a player. I mean, it's really pretty amazing that never really, became a thing on the depth chart, never really heard that he was ever really pushing for playing time. It was just total, almost radio silence, from the very moment that he signed with UGA. And to me, some of this seems like it's probably injury related, that he was banged up, and that maybe affected his ability to kind of develop his body as well as it probably could be. He came in a little smaller than the average offensive lineman that Georgia was kind of signing during that Sam Pittman period there, and maybe he never added the mass that he needed to add. But I'm curious about your thought on this of when a guy like Webb is like this huge prospect and then it just doesn't materialize at all, what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, it's an interesting case because he's an athletic guy. He moves well. And I'm going to reflect back to 2 situations. One, I was at the training camp practice beginning of this past season, and he was off to the side doing rehab, basically, and not being able to get the reps to compete for a spot. So I think injuries and opportunity has certainly been affected because of that. The second thing is a conversation I had with Jeff Sintel at one of our DawgNation Marlowe's Tavern events, and we got on the subject of Clay Webb and how he was projected more as a center because of his willingness to step into that role primarily at the All-Star games and those evaluation summits that they have, and he performed well. And you look at the fact that he's not one of those 325, 330 type guys. And I think he started to get kind of pigeonholed as a 5-star center. And my understanding is that he's probably more of a guard and by nature with a willingness to play center. And so, it's one of those deals where whether it's system, whether it's not really understanding the fit for him as a player or his inability to develop to a point to become part of the conversation. He's about to start his 4th year at Georgia and has never really been a factor in that top 2 depth chart. So that you look at projections and you figure a guy with a skill set can develop into the player that you project him to, and sometimes that pans out and sometimes it doesn't. And I can't speak to where he's been in this process the entire time, but it obviously hasn't been he hasn't been part of the discussion, and you can understand why someone like that who's got ability might be willing and wanting to see if he can't find more traction in another program. And I think it's a much different case when you're looking at Clay Webb and Amarius Mims, 2 very different scenarios as to why a guy might want to look somewhere else and the reasons behind it.
I'll also say this, that, I think there's a lot of Georgia fans who probably have a little bit of a wait-and-see approach to Stacey Searles right now as offensive line coach, and I probably understand that to a degree, but I don't really put either of these on Searles, right? I mean, the Mims thing had been kind of sort of chatted about, in internet circles for quite some time. The Webb story, as you said, this has been going on now for multiple years, that I don't really lay either of these transfers at the feet of Searles, because these are both situations that he kind of inherited. Do you kind of view it the same way, that this is not the kind of thing where really either guy is thought to be leaving because of, some issue with Stacey Searles, that a lot of folks were kind of wondering what was going to be, the fit for Amarius Mims even before Searles got here?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a good problem, but it's still a problem. I mean, he walks in and you've got 20 guys in your room that all came in either highly rated or with experience, to where they come in with expectations of realistic playing time. And so it makes sense to me that those that haven't established themselves as part of that main discussion, the top 5, especially for Mims, but 2 deep for Webb and others, because I don't think these will be the last 2 to make a decision prior to training camp starting, is you want to see in training camp, in this spring ball, can I shift my situation? Can I improve it? Can I make an impression on this new offensive line coach? And all of a sudden I become part of this discussion where I haven't been up to this point. And I think that's part of having so many guys in that room that are capable. And, we're entering the last week of spring ball for this group, and they're saying, okay, I've got a much better picture of where I stand and what my opportunity is going to look like in 2 or 3 months. So I need to make a decision now. And that's probably the case for both of these guys. They've given, and it's not a Stacey Searles situation, they've given a fair assessment to where they stand and the talent around them. And they're saying, you know what, there might be a better fit for me elsewhere. So certainly not an indictment of Searles and his 2 weeks of spring ball with these guys. I think it's both of them have been in the talks of what's it going to look like for them once the season kicks off. I think, especially for Mims, the question was, is he capable? Is he willing to move into the inside, or can we get away with another year of him being a swing tackle? And would that be satisfactory to what he's wanting to contribute to a team? And Broderick Jones and McClendon, neither one of them are entering into their last year of eligibility with Georgia, so it was certainly a question mark as to how Amarius is going to fit into this picture anyway.
John, fascinating stuff. Great insight. Thank you so much for your time here today. Appreciate you helping us kind of make sense of a couple of very interesting situations here for UGA. So good stuff all the way around. We'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you here soon there as well, and hope you have a great week.
Hey, likewise, BA. Go Dogs.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, to kind of put a little bit of a bow on the Mims thing for now, when you have a player of Mims' potential, when you have a talent that's as measurable as his is, and he leaves the program, that's not good news, right? It's not nothing to lose a player like Mims. I certainly didn't want that to happen, but as I've said now many times, I also don't want to see Georgia make a lot of compromises in terms of what it is as a way of keeping guys like Mims in the fold. I don't want to see that either. That there's I don't even think it's like a Goldilocks zone or whatever, but there's a certain level of talent you have to have, but also a certain willingness to comply that talent has to have there as well. In other words, are you talented enough to play at a place like Georgia, and are you willing to buy into the system and do the things that Georgia's going to ask of you while you are here? And that is not an easy thing to find, but obviously if it was easy, every program would do it. And therefore, that's the path for Georgia, to find that elite talent and to work hard to develop that talent, make the players better on the other side than they would be somewhere else, And that's just the job that guys like Kirby Smart have signed up for. So we'll see what the aftermath of all of this holds, with Mims apparently now on the move, Clay Webb there as well. Pretty interesting stuff from John Stinchcomb on all of that. Fun announcement for us coming up in a couple of minutes. Before that, though, let me remind you, we're getting so close to cruising around the SEC. Not just cruising around the SEC, but cruising indeed with the Royal Caribbean, the very first ever cruise with DawgNation. That's coming up just a couple of weeks away. So excited about being on board Independence of the Seas for all of that. And you still got, a little bit of time to get on board here. I mean, the fact of the matter is the spots have really kind of run out. Time is almost running out. So this may be one of those deals where you either get on board now or you live vicariously through us and have your own chance to take your own cruise here coming up very soon. Either way, no better time to do that than right now with our friends at Royal Caribbean. It is just so much fun to be going. We're going to the Bahamas, Nassau, perfect day, Coco Cay, amazing ports we get to visit, fun things we get to enjoy on board the Independence of the Seas. This is a really cool ship. Got some great specialty restaurants. There's a sports bar, Playmaker Sports Bar. They're on the ship. That's a fun thing. There's Chops Grill. There's so many there's ice skating rink. There's just amazing things to do, like on board. Great entertainment options available. Wonderful ports to visit. Having so much fun. This is a great time to be doing this with our friends who are going to be on board with us and DawgNation as we set sail here, leaving April 25th out of Port Canaveral, going to Nassau, going to a perfect day, Coco Cay, on board Independence of the Seas. And if you can't be on board this cruise with us, reach out to our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority and make your own plans to set sail with Royal Caribbean here sometime this spring, sometime this summer. Ships are back on the seas, having a great time. I was just on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship in February. Trust me when I tell you, it was a blast. And I want you to do the same thing, whether it's our very first ever cruise with DawgNation coming up on April 25th or your own cruise after that. This is a great time to be doing that. All right, that said, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean here for a moment. So in light of what we're talking about today with Georgia, losing a couple of former high-profile recruits to the transfer portal, Dabo Swinney's recent words over the weekend get probably even more attention because of that. Dabo is not a fan of some of these changes to college football. Dabo takes a lot of heat from the sort of typical social media mob about stuff like this. Even though I don't necessarily agree with everything that Dabo says, the fact that he doesn't change his tune in light of all the criticism that he gets, I think there's a point in which that's kind of admirable, I guess, a bit. Dabo is more than happy to swim in the opposite direction as the current of culture on this. I think we have a couple of these quotes we can show you here. Dabo Swinney about, taking players in the transfer portal. This is something that Dabo really hasn't done. I think he did take a transfer this year, but it was a player that used to be at Clemson. So that's not exactly, a full dip into the portal. He says, my transfer portal is right in there in that locker room. Because if I'm constantly going out after every year and adding guys from the transfer portal, I'm telling all those guys in that locker room that I don't believe in them, Dabo explained. We're also not doing our jobs as coaches and recruiters if we're bringing in a bunch of transfers. Is that anything else? Yeah, so that's Dabo Swinney on that topic there. And as I said before, I think that's an actually pretty admirable stance. And I can promise you this, the players themselves love that. Now listen, Georgia fans aren't Clemson fans. They don't like Dabo Swinney, but I'm going to stick up for Dabo here on this a little bit, is that if you can look at a player and tell him, hey, if I offer you a scholarship, I'm not going to pull that offer from you. Or if I bring you into this program, I'm not going to take a transfer portal player and basically like give him the spot that you're trying to earn. That's the promise I'm willing to make to you as a coach. Like, that's actually pretty admirable. That's actually kind of a cool thing that Dabo Swinney has been able to do. But it is fair to wonder how much that's going to work in the future, because it's one thing not to take portal players as long as your quarterback's Trevor Lawrence, or not to take portal players as long as your quarterback's Deshaun Watson. When you've got these all-time great level quarterbacks who are leading you to the playoff and national championships, they can help cover up some other deficiencies you might otherwise have on your roster. But when you don't have that guy at quarterback anymore, when your quarterback's DJ Uiagalelei, who did not have a great year last year, all of a sudden the relative lack of roster strength in other places is going to be just more accentuated. So this is where Dabo's strong line, hard line stance on this, I think is going to be curious to see how that impacts Clemson's status as a perennial playoff contender. Because as I mentioned off the top of the program, I like the idea that Georgia seems to have some unwavering principles. It's going to ask a lot of the players to come to this program. It's going to ask them to sacrifice some glory. It's going to ask them to be a little bit patient. It's going to ask a lot from them. But that doesn't change the fact that Georgia still needs elite players. In other words, just give me guys who want to be here. That alone's not enough. You have to have elite players who want to be here if you want to truly play at the national championship level. So it's one thing that Dabo Swinney says that he's not interested in the transfer portal. He doesn't want to do that. I think it's fair to wonder, okay, well, that's a cool experiment. I'm glad you're trying this, but let's see how it works. And it's not obvious that it's going to continue to work, that if you're not willing to utilize whatever the program, the sport is willing to utilize, if you're not willing to play that game at all, can you remain an elite championship contending program? If Clemson does, then, I mean, as much as Georgia fans kind of don't want to hear this, I think that says something pretty good about Dabo Swinney, but it's not obvious it's going to work out for him if he doesn't quite have that great quarterback the way that he's had in the past. By the way, speaking of transfers, another interesting story on that front. Alabama appears poised to lose. In fact, into the transfer portal goes former 5-star wide receiver Jai Hall. Saban announced over the course of the last couple of days that Ajayi was going to be suspended for violation of team rules, not getting too specific about what that is. We even speculated about this last week, that it's just been long thought that Saban and Hall were kind of not seeing eye to eye, that some of the stuff that Saban said critical of why Alabama lost the national championship game, a lot of this was kind of thought to be almost like a verbal subtweet of Hall and his unwillingness to buy into what Alabama was asking from him. And now all of this has kind of come to a head with, Bama suspending Hall now looking to move on. This has kind of been out there for a while. Just given the baggage that he seems to have because of his time in Alabama, I'd be surprised if Georgia got involved here, just because, I don't know, there's probably going to be a lot of kicking the tires that goes on with Hall based on the fact that he did not really quite work out so well in Alabama. But I guess you have a couple of takeaways on this that, not even the mighty Crimson Tide, as they're viewed to be by many, are immune to these kind of, issues where guys come in, they're going to want certain things, and you can't make everybody happy right away. And if you're a great coach, you don't even try to. That you try to manage your program and run it the very best you possibly can, and it's not going to be for everybody. That's true for Saban in Alabama. It's true for Kirby Smart at Georgia, and maybe the example of that there with the Ajayi Hall story. And then finally, there's this. I saw where both Kendall Briles and Barry Odom spoke to reporters there at Arkansas over the course of the last couple of days, and both spoke about their decision to stay with the Razorbacks. Obviously, Barry Odom's former head coach, he turned down big money to go be Texas defensive coordinator when Steve Sarkisian was first hired. I'm sure Odom's got all kinds of job opportunities and offers, and Kendall Briles we know has, and yet both guys thus far have chosen to stay with Sam Pittman. This continues to be, to me, one of the most interesting stories in college football, and it's kind of a feel-good story for us around here because we do enjoy rooting for Pittman. We're happy to see him having the success that he's enjoying there at Arkansas. But beyond that, this is a guy that almost no one would have ever guessed would go from offensive line coach at Georgia, especially kind of the advanced, Pittman's not an old man, but to just only recently being even mentioned as a possible head coach. I just don't think many people saw this coming for Pittman. You leave Georgia's offensive line coach, you go become head coach at Arkansas. It's a little bit of an experiment. And yet Pittman, through the strength of his coordinator hires, has had amazing, success over the course of his first 2 years in the job there, especially compared to where Chad Morris had that program before Pittman got there. This is an incredible level of success they're enjoying. The fact that Pittman's now holding on to these coordinators now for a whole nother year gives them a chance to take even another step towards success and more development of the program here in year 3. I mean, I could not be happier for Pittman to see him having the success that he's having. And I think that Arkansas is really on its way to being a real player in the SEC West, a very tough out for anybody that plays them, and really a team to keep in mind for some pretty big things here in the 2022 season. So Pittman continues to do a good job, and holding on to those coordinators continues to be a big reason for all of that. All right, so let me say this before we wrap up. And by the way, that was our cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. So this is a very big week for DawgNation. We have a lot of events coming up, and I want you to be aware of as we head towards G-Day on Saturday. But before we kind of get to the rest of the week, let me just talk about Wednesday a little bit. It's going to be an amazing day as we are there at Truist Park, Battery, Atlanta, broadcasting live from Sport and Social that morning, obviously starting for our first and 15 at 9:45, and then 10 a.m. after that as the Atlanta Braves celebrate Champions Week. It's so much fun to have Major League Baseball back. Great to have the Braves going again. Just fun to watch everybody kind of reacting to that on social media, and we're all watching those games together and everything else like that. And obviously, it's a great time to be a Braves fan there as well, as they continue to celebrate their World Series championship. As we start the 2022 season, they're giving out the replica rings today for their home game, which I know is going to be a very, very high commodity, big hot ticket for the game today. But on Wednesday, we're going to be there because not only do the Braves continue their celebrating of their own championship, but that day they're going to be celebrating UGA there as well. Because for the 12:20 start against the Nationals, before that, from 10 until noon there that morning, this is on Wednesday, the Braves World Series trophy and the Georgia College Football Playoff National Championship trophy are going to be there together. And if you got a ticket for the game there that day, you can get your picture taken with both of those great trophies. This is going down on Wednesday. We're going to be broadcasting live there. It is going to be a super, super fun day. For those of us who are Georgia fans and Braves fans, the idea that both these trophies in the same place at the same time is just a really, really cool thing. And I cannot wait to do that there on Wednesday. So I want you to be there and be a part of it. Go to Braves.com/Champions Week. You can find out more about the event and you can get your tickets. It's Braves.com/Champions Week. But there's also this. Tomorrow on this program, we're going to give away 3 pairs of tickets for the game on Wednesday. So tune in to DawgNation Daily tomorrow. We've got 3 pairs of tickets for the Wednesday day game against the Nationals, where the Georgia Trophy and the Braves Trophy are going to be there together. We're going to give those tickets to you. Somebody, it may not be you, but maybe it will be. The point is, we're going to give away 3 pairs of tickets tomorrow on this show. So big event. Wednesday, we're broadcasting live from Sport and Social Battery Atlanta. It's Champions Week celebration with the Braves. The World Series trophy, the National Championship trophy, going to both be there together. If you got a ticket to the game, you can get your picture taken with both those trophies. And tomorrow, we're going to give away 3 pairs of tickets for the Braves game on Wednesday as Champions Week is celebrated right there at Truist Park. So Braves.com/Champions Week. Tickets to give away tomorrow. Man, what a great time to be a Braves fan and a Georgia fan. What a great time to be just enjoying the world of sports. And we'll have a lot more fun with you on that tomorrow, heading towards our live broadcast from the Battery Atlanta coming up on Wednesday. So you got all that? Does that make sense? Any questions about that? We'll tell you more about that tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. So kind of a happy way to conclude what was a little bit of a stressful topic related to a couple of former elite recruits in the transfer portal for UGA. By the way, speaking of happy, good news, let's also keep that going as well with our golden shoe here today. Someone was nice enough to share this with me, Keith McCants, and this is really cool. So we'll give Keith a golden shoe for this. A great video of Quay Walker Day in his hometown of Cordele, Georgia. I actually drove by Cordele yesterday. But great to see the former Crisp County linebacker honored there in his hometown of Cordele on Quay Walker Day. We've seen a few of these lately for former Dogs or current Dogs being honored by their hometown. That's a great thing to see. Quay has represented that town and that community so well while at UGA and is on his way to being a big-time draft pick there as well. So congratulations to him. Quay Walker Day in Cordele, Georgia. That's awesome to see. Here's what else is awesome to see there as well. Gator Hater Updater. 4,841 days since the lousy, stinking Gators have celebrated a national championship. A lot of Georgia fans in Crisp County know a lot of Florida fans down there, and they love to talk trash about that. And that's not going to stop anytime soon. Here's what else is not stopping anytime soon. The Gator Hater Countdown. Dogs back in Jacksonville 201 days from right now, beating Florida again. That's our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll take your comments here on YouTube and Facebook and DawgNation.com. And we'll remind you that R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. It's been a little bit cold lately. I was in Florida over the course of the last couple of days. It was unseasonably cold there. But that doesn't mean that warm weather is not on its way. It'll be here to stay eventually. And that means you want that air conditioning unit tuned up and ready to go for the hot weather that's coming. So get some peace of mind by getting it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, your comments here, and then we'll get ready to bounce out of here after that. Good stuff. All right, here we go. Jay Scheib says it's been 2.75 weeks with no YouTube start. Well, shows how you're wrong. Jay, we'll add this to the list of things you've been wrong about because here I am starting on YouTube here today. But I'm happy to have you here nonetheless. Green Soldier says, I can't wait to rub it into the Tennessee and Florida fans' faces about the fact that Kirby can't develop. Yeah, there's no ground to stand on that when it comes to that topic anymore. Our buddy AKA checking in to say, how many times has a Division I college football team and Major League Baseball team in the same state won the national championship in the same year? That's a good question. How often has that happened? Couldn't have happened too much because you don't have a ton of examples of it necessarily overlapping with each other. Pretty good point. Cineo G says, can't wait for G-Day. Yeah, I'm excited about that there as well. We got huge events coming up on Saturday in Athens, which I'm really looking forward to. Excited about that. Anthony White checks in to say it's a lot of talent on the offensive line. If Amarius Mims was on the verge of passing someone on the depth chart, he would have stayed. Broderick Jones, McClendon not getting passed over. Yeah, listen, I'm just a big believer that success leaves clues, that it had been a little quiet on the Mims front. I don't mind telling you that. However, I'm also totally open to the idea, and I think this has been true for a lot of players who've left, that if they could have just seen more into the future, that their opportunity for earning that playing time eventually. I mean, look. I mean, at the beginning of last year, we weren't talking a ton about Broderick Jones either. And by the national championship game, he's a big reason why Georgia won the game. That a lot happens over the course of a year. That I mean, at one point in time, a lot of folks were wondering what was going on with Broderick Jones. How come he's not playing more? Well, now he's about to be started at left tackle. That if you're just willing to be patient a little bit, that things can fall into place for you. And the hard work that you're doing will pay off. That it just becomes very hard to see that sometimes. Our buddy Joel Sidney Kelly checking in to say, how do I get in that drawing for the tickets? So we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. We're going to try to make this very, very simple and straightforward, so we'll do more of that with you tomorrow. Foster Moss, yeah, I saw the Braves rings. They are nice. Are the Braves, they have it's almost like a poison ring or something, the fact that it opens up. That's a new thing, right? Have championship rings done that before? I don't know. But it's very, very nice. Yeah, I was very impressed with them. Very impressed. Let's see what else. Scott Harris says, who's going to be this spring game's A.D. Mitchell? So it'd have to be someone we kind of don't I mean, like last year, the Mitchell thing was validation of what the buzz had been for him during the spring. But if you want to go back to when he first arrived at Georgia, him being the focal point of G-Day would have been a huge surprise. So it'd have to be someone kind of along those lines. You know, we talked to Terrence last week about Jackson Meeks. I guess Meeks would maybe because, like as I say all the time, like the issue at Georgia is finding a player that's truly off the radar enough to actually count as a surprise. You know, Georgia has so many players who are so hyped up, much to the chagrin of Kirby Smart, who even addressed that with Amarius Mims last week. But Georgia has so many players who are so hyped up that it's hard to find a player who is off the radar enough to even count as a surprise. And so that's kind of the issue. But a guy like Meeks would probably be at least off the radar enough where if he has a big day at G-Day, that'd probably count as a surprise. But my gosh, almost everybody else in that wide receiver room in some form or fashion this spring has been hyped up somehow, some way. So hard to find that. TJ Smith says these kids are used to having immediate gratification and getting things immediately. The ones that stay are the ones willing to work instead of just being given the position. I mean, look, excuse me. I am somewhat cognizant of the fact that if you say stuff like that, like what TJ's saying and what I have a tendency to agree with, that it kind of makes you sound like, well, kind of an old guy pining for the way things used to be. And I don't know how old TJ is, but I'm saying people might say this about me, that I'm somewhat kind of aware that that's kind of how that comes across. But at the same time, I mean, there is a true time-tested path towards success. That you have to be a gifted athlete who's willing to outwork everybody else. That's what you have to be. Now, maybe Mims is that guy. Here's the point. Is like if Kirby Smart were sitting here, he might very well say, in fact, I think he did say something along these lines going back to last week, that Mims might have been on his way to doing this. You know, this is the thing is like I think that some people want to make it be, Mims leaving proves that he's not Georgia material, and that's not what Smart would probably say. What Smart would probably say is, hey, he was on his way to being everything that he ever hoped he could be. but it's just going to take a little time to get there. And that's what I think that Smart would probably say on that. And a lot of the players who've left Georgia, I've kind of felt the same way about it. Of like, man, if you just waited a little bit longer, how much, success you could have enjoyed. That we are going to have to. A place like Georgia is the kind of place where, patience is going to be rewarded, and impatience is going to be. It's not going to be a great fit here. But, just because he left doesn't mean that he's not a good player. He probably was eventually going to be a good player. Certainly had the talent to be anything he wanted to be. But maybe just a little bit more patience would have served him well at a place like UGA. Memphis Dog says, I'm not very patient with players' impatience, which is kind of a funny line. But here's the other thing to consider, Memphis, is that, and we talked about this a few days ago related to Kendall Milton, something that Milton said, is that it's not just the players who are impatient. It's the fans who get impatient with the players too. It's almost like there are some fans who sort of spoke the Mims thing into existence, because when he wasn't playing right away, wait, what's going on with Amarius Mims? How come he's not playing? How come whatever else? Like there are some fans who are just as impatient about these 5-star players as the 5-star players might be themselves. I mean, if you really want to be, real about that. And, Kendall Milton told you a couple of weeks ago that, hey, when I stepped onto this practice field, I forget exactly what he said, but basically learn how to be patient, learn how to not expect too much too soon, and kind of work my way into all of this. It's a big challenge when you go from dominating in high school to competing in college. It's not an easy step to take. And I think sometimes, some fans are just as impatient about the elite 5-star talent as the player himself might be. Like I said before, I hope my voice is not distracting. I don't know why it's doing this today. Let me go over to Facebook here for a minute. Herb Hamilton says, hate to lose anyone, but players have to continue to grow at the next level. 5 stars in high school stops there, must keep getting better. Don't know if he maxed out or just got surpassed by others. Hope it works out for him. I don't get the impression he was necessarily surpassed by anybody else. I mean, the guy that was going to work his way into a starting job here this year, was Broderick Jones. That's a year older player. Now you would say, well, a year ago, Tate Ratledge was more in line for playing time right away than Mims was, but how much of that is about position fit and things like that, I honestly don't really know. And, it's hard to know that for sure. Now, I also saw a comment a little earlier from someone who was like, hey, well, sometimes the coaches get it wrong. Like Warren Erickson was in line to be the starter last year at center, and obviously, after he got hurt, SVP stepped in and showed you how good he was. Maybe that's a fact in this conversation, that ought to be considered there as well. But, I don't necessarily get the impression that other guys were necessarily outperforming Amarius Mims. I just don't think it was happening for Mims as fast as he wanted it to. R. Edward Moore says that my voice sounds like Casey Kasem today. Yeah, I don't mind the scratchy stuff. It's like the nasal stuff that gets on my nerves. But the scratchy stuff I don't mind. But the nasal stuff is the part that I kind of, get aggravated by. Eric Ryan Summer, hope to see you at G-Day there as well. Yeah, please come see us at the bookstore. We'll be on the second floor there for our post-game show. Come by and see us. I'd love to take a picture with you there as well and just say hello and say, say hello. Randy Hall says that Darnell Washington, Amarius Mims' roommate, any concern about that? I mean, the Washington thing is a little bit like the Mims stuff, and the fact that, these rumors have been out there forever, and, last week Darnell Washington spoke to reporters. What does that mean? I don't really know. But, I mean, the Washington rumors have been, and the Mims rumors have been going on for quite some time. So, I don't really know. But I also don't think I just don't know what you do about it. What should Georgia do? Now, right now, Darnell Washington's hurt. But, I mean, Georgia had a great tight end emerge last year. Brock Bowers is that guy. And are they supposed to give Brock Bowers less touches because they're afraid Darnell Washington might transfer? And I don't want Darnell Washington to transfer. I think he's a really good player. But, I mean, there was an opportunity to be had, and Brock Bowers took it. He's supposed to apologize for that? I don't really know what you do about that. And I'd love to find a way for everybody to kind of coexist together, but I don't know. I mean, it is just tough to keep everybody happy. It just is. And, based on the fact that, there have been some nice things said about Darnell recently, maybe Darnell is comfortable and happy here, but hard not to notice there have been some of those kind of same rumors, the same way there have been about the Mims thing. And, listen, Darnell showed you when he's gotten a chance, when he's been healthy, he's shown you how talented he can be. And in a place like Georgia where the offense functions so well for tight ends, I hope he gets a chance to really thrive in that environment here this year. I do. But, the Darnell thing is another example where I certainly don't think you can say Georgia has done wrong, done Darnell wrong or done poorly by him. Georgia has completely enhanced its, development of tight ends, the way it uses tight ends. And it just so happens a player that plays at Darnell's position has turned out to be one of the all-time greats. And that's just kind of the way it goes. Craig Childers says if you want to recruit 3-star players and have them play 4 years, you're not winning titles. Jordan Davis is an exception, and he's an outlier. You're not going to have a whole team of outliers. I would agree with that. That elite talent is necessary, but elite talent that wants to buy into the system is also necessary too. In other words, you can't have one of two extremes. Like some coaches are like, hey, give me the 11 guys that want to be here. I don't care about star ranking. That, as the commenter said, that team's not winning very much. But on the other side of that is, hey, I'll make whatever promise I have to get an elite talent through the door. I would suggest that team's not winning very much either. That you have to have that combination of both. The elite player who wants to be pushed to be an even better version of himself. That's really what Georgia has done well. That's what Alabama has done well. Those are the programs that have really, in Alabama's case, been able to maintain a long track record of success because they're going to bring in the elite player. They're going to push him to be the best version of himself he can be. And they're not going to compromise, their, program identity for the sake of getting, special talents through the door because that's what Kentucky basketball does, or at least what it appears to do. And they're not winning anything. And there's no shortage of NBA talent walking through those doors. And it's a, pipeline of elite recruits. But it's also a pipeline of first and second round exits in the NCAA tournament. That there is a way to, make compromises to get elite talent that doesn't leave you very successful as a team. That you have to have that perfect epicenter of elite talent who wants to buy into what this program is all about. And by this program, I mean any program, whether it be Georgia, Alabama, or anything else. Jamie Huff on the subject of Clemson, that they were mostly 3-star players when they won their first chip. As we said during the regular show, Clemson has been the most, I guess, ardent about not compromising on anything, not bringing transfer players in. They don't sign these big recruiting classes. They just don't play the game when it comes to the player acquisition drama. They truly don't do that. But they've also had 2 all-time great quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. And in the absence of a quarterback of that caliber, how much will Clemson's unwillingness to play the game, so to speak, how much will that become an issue? We're about to find out. Last year, they were not a playoff contender. Do they regain playoff contender status, or is this one of those things that, hey, in the post-Trevor Lawrence, post-Deshaun Watson world, this is a good team but not a great team? We're about to find that out. Matt Rukavina on me, as he says, dunking on UK and Cal. Yeah, I've said this before. I think being a Kentucky basketball fan would probably be one of the most miserable things in the world. That you've got all these elite recruits. They all go on to be, for the most part, many of them go on to be great NBA players. They're not winning anything in college. Like, that's a miserable thing. Miserable. They are a brief stopover for elite recruits on the way to an NBA payday. Like, I mean, if your grandparents had season tickets at Rupp Arena, are you happy with what Kentucky basketball has become? I just can't imagine you would be. And there's no shortage of great talent. I mean, they've been number 1 or number 2 in recruiting, I think, every year for the last 6 years or something like that. But it's not amounting to anything. So that's not what I'd want, certainly Georgia football to be. James Crump on the subject of Trayvon Walker compared to Jermaine Johnson. I mentioned this before. Like, while Johnson may be a defensive lineman, he is being drafted as kind of an edge rusher, right? I mean, like that's the way that he's being viewed. So his stats theoretically do matter, but the fact that that's the lack of great, hugely productive stats, the fact that that's not going to harm his draft status whatsoever is a reminder here that, we'll go back to the Jermaine Johnson thing, as I said during the show. Listen, Johnson wanted more stats. It's his right to want what he wants. But better stats did not, in my mind, make Jermaine Johnson a better player. They didn't. It may have been fun to have a prolific year. It may have been fun to be, kind of a one-man gang for the Florida State defense. But the added production did not make Johnson a better player. It just maybe the lure of more stats may have helped pull him away from the Georgia roster. But the stats alone did not get attention from NFL draft scouts. Trust me when I tell you that Johnson was already on their radar prior to leaving Georgia. All right, a couple more comments. DawgNation.com. Let's see what else. Big Natty Dog says the higher up you go in football, the less fun, the more work it becomes. I mean, this is the kind of thing you see like coaches subtweeting all the time. It is true. And I think you have to be kind of like a guy with a little bit of gray in his hair to maybe fully appreciate this. But there are some people, and I'm not saying Amarius Mims was this guy, because honestly, in light of Mims leaving, you can say what you want, but I mean, no one's really trashing Mims on the way out the door here. Maybe he was a little too impatient. Maybe you wish this was different, that was different. But it's not like anybody who thinks that like Mims is not going to go somewhere else and have the potential to be a good football player. A lot of people think that he obviously probably will be. But to the commenter's point, you see coaches saying this all the time. And like I said before, maybe from the experience of years, I maybe understand this a bit more. There are people out there who are far more in love with the idea of being a football player than they are with the actual task of being a player. That the actual task of being a player is just not always very fun. Like a lot of people think they want to be a player until they actually have to go do and what a player does, which is push yourself beyond, your body's hurting, but you got to get up and go do it anyway. You're tired, but you got to get up and go do it anyway. You're not getting complimented very much anymore. You're not getting very many pats in the back anymore, but you got to get up and go do it anyway. There is a task of being a player that is very joyless. And it's just simply about, that inner drive to be the best version of yourself you possibly can be. And there's no, Instagram workout videos. There's no whatever else going on. It is just alone with your effort, trying to be the best version of yourself you can be. And that is not very fun. I think that's true. All right. Let's get a couple more comments. Randy Hall about Duke basketball. They've got big recruiting classes coming in even post Coach K. And let's see how that program now kind of evolves on that too. That's probably fair to wonder. West G, a dog fan, on the subject of too many I's and not enough, we's when it comes to a team. And I think it's very easy to wonder what's in it for me. I used to work in radio. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to get off the air here in a minute because I'm just getting a little too scratchy. But I used to always say that everybody's favorite radio station was basically like what's in it for me, right? Like, that's what everybody's always asking. And players are going to be asking the same kind of thing there as well. That, what is kind of in it for me when it comes to, my chance on this team, my opportunity for playing time. Everybody has the goal of wanting to go to the NFL, but understanding the, excuse me, the path that's going to get you there is not always going to be a whole lot of fun. It's just not always going to be, a very sort of glory-filled path. It's just going to have its challenges, and that's probably true. All right, so I'm going to get ready to wrap up here because I'm obviously getting a little bit coffee here a little bit. One or two more comments before we go. All right, anything else? Let me just wrap up for today. We'll do more comments tomorrow. Hopefully my throat will sound better. Thanks for being here for the R.S. Sanders Cool Down. Y'all check out the AJC online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. They'll get you covered for all your news as the Braves roll on. So much fun stuff going on there. They'll get you covered on all of that. Obviously, RS Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can find them online at rsandrews.com there as well. Sorry for the scratchy conclusion today, but we'll have more for you tomorrow. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.